This is Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty. Greetings and welcome to Wrestling Nostalgia. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining us and listening. Like we said, we are back, and we are back in full force, coming out to you every other week, and we're glad that you're still on board with us. So let's talk a few things before we dive into it. Our guest today is Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., and he is here, and he's going to talk about Dr. Jerry Graham, his mentor, because a lot of times what you hear about Jerry Graham is just the negatives, right? You just hear the negative side of him and all those things, and the alcoholism, and the deal with his mom when she passed away, and all these things. And Jerry he wanted to come on and talk some of the good stuff, right? About the legacy of Dr. Jerry Graham. And he doesn't deny that Jerry had his demons. Jerry Graham had his demons and had his things that he fought with, and that got control of him at times. But in the course of discussing those things, a lot of times the positives are overlooked. I mean, we're talking about a guy. He served in World War II, right? He was a war hero, right? He fought for our country, defended our country. In wrestling, he was a huge draw, right? Sold out Madison Square Garden. He wrestled the likes of Buddy Rogers, Bruno Sammartino, many, many others. Teamed with Eddie Graham, and they sold out Madison Square Garden. They were the hottest tag team at that time, a ground-shaping tag team at that time. Vince McMahon Jr.'s favorite wrestler. He trained so many guys and helped get so many guys into the business. He was the first Graham brother, right? The first guy. And he helped get these guys in, and in turn, a lot of that, there was a trickle-down effect in the influence and everything else. And, and again, we're not trying to say there's not a negative side, as there is to everybody. But with Jerry Graham Jr., a lot of times that positive side gets overlooked for the negative, right? There's lots of wrestlers held on pedestals who had very, very negative sides and very, very negative aspects, but that's often overlooked. I feel a big proponent of this might be that, Dr. Jerry Graham, some of his prime years is not available on video, right? You can't look it up on YouTube and see some of his prime stuff as readily as you can other guys. And, so I think he's a victim of that a little bit, that, right? All you hear when you look up are these wild tales of the wild side and things like that, and some of the stuff from the tail end of his career. So you missed a lot of the positives. So anyway, Jerry Graham Jr. is on today and to talk about that and discuss that and shine a little positive light on that. Let's talk about one aspect here of modern wrestling that I wanted to touch on. Everybody knows that I like and enjoy, and I'm fans of CM Punk and FTR. And I am even more so now because after the August 5th AEW Collision episode, Punk and FTR honored Dennis Condrey. He was in attendance at the show because they were in North Carolina, and they brought him in the ring. They spoke highly of him, especially Dax Harwood. Spoke highly of him, said lots of things, let him speak, got the crowd popping for him. And, man, I love that, right? I'm a huge Dennis Condrey fan, as everybody knows. I love the Midnight Express, all incarnations. And I love it, man. I love seeing a guy like Dennis Condrey who doesn't get the props he deserves for how good he is and how much he shaped tag team wrestling and everything else. A lot of people don't get that. A lot of people, when they think Midnight Express, they think Bobby Eaton and Stan Layden. I love that combo, too. But a lot of people often forget about Dennis Condrey a little bit. Not true fans, but some of your more peripheral general fans do. And so it was really, really, really great to see Dennis Condrey getting his props, getting in front of the crowd there in AEW, and getting some cheers. And I love that. And hats off to Punk and FTR for doing that. So I just wanted to talk about that for a minute because, man, it was good stuff. And you can look it up on YouTube. It was post-show, but you can look it up on YouTube and watch it. And I suggest you do, man. It was heartwarming. It was great. And it's something that, modern wrestling needs a little more of. And again, I'm a huge Dennis Condrey fan. So that was pretty cool and very, very awesome. So, all right, that's enough of the modern wrestling. So let's take a little break. And like I said, when we come back, we'll have Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., who's going to discuss the legacy of Dr. Jerry Graham. So stick around. If you like horror movies, be sure to check out Dave Dynasty and Ike Isaacs on the Listen to Their Screams Horror Podcast. It is available on all podcast platforms and on social media at Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2, and Screams. All right, we're back here on Wrestling Nostalgia, and we're joined by longtime friend of the show, the legendary Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. Jerry, how are you doing?
Real good, David. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Always a pleasure to do your show.
Well, I appreciate that. And We got a very specific purpose here today to talk because it seems that most of the stories nowadays that are being told about your mentor, Dr. Jerry Graham, are from a negative and an almost mocking perspective. And we're here today. We want to shine some light on Dr. Jerry Graham and show the other side, and so that it's not just those
exactly
things.
what I want to do. I just like to, I'm not bragging, but I'd like to introduce myself to some of your younger fans who may not know who I am. I participated in professional wrestling for 40 years, from the 70s to the turn of the century. I had wrestled probably over 25 or 30 of the real world champions. I mean, WWF, WCW, there's all kinds of little promotions, but I've wrestled all the main names of my time, 90% of them anyway. I have a good, solid experience in this business. I feel I am qualified to talk about it. But what we're going to be saying here is going to be opinions, and some people may differ with my opinions. I'm not preaching. I'm just giving my opinion on something. And we're going to talk about Dr. Jerry Graham, who was my mentor. I've been in wrestling before I met Jerry, but Jerry made me Jerry Graham Jr. and began what was the best part of my career. Now, right now, the way things stand, there may be two people in the whole world that know more about Jerry Graham than me. One would be Vince McMahon Jr. and one would be Mark Lewin. Everybody else has passed on or not involved anymore. But Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., a senior, and I were partners. He lived at my house. We traveled together. He worked for me in my restaurant. We were good friends. And yes, we all know the negative stories about him, or many of us do, about his mother dying, about his battles with alcohol. They're all true. And he had some very dark side to him. But what I've been hearing I'm not going to call it any names because I got a lot of friends in the business who I'm disagreeing with. They've called Jerry Graham a maniac. They've called him useless. They've said he was this, he was that. He was a terrible person. And as not being fair to the history of wrestling, which is what I hope that I'm a part of, a wrestling historian, because I have a lot of experience in the business. I've talked to a lot of the wrestlers. Anybody's heard my book, my audio book, Confessions of a Big Time Wrestler. That was about other wrestlers that I met in stories. And I'm going to start from here by saying that I always, when I'm talking, I categorize my stories into absolute fact that I've seen myself with my own eyes, heard with my own ears, to things that I haven't seen myself, but I have credible witnesses that I believe, and three, the urban legends. So anything I say, I will tell you what category it falls under. All
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Okay, now, first of all, some facts. The original Sheik, who I started with his promotion, and I got to be in his inner circle for a while, we were sitting in Brower's Delicatessen in Toledo, Ohio one night after the show, and he started talking about Dr. Jerry Graham, and this is before I teamed up with him. Okay. He says, Dr. Jerry Graham was one of the best wrestlers I've ever seen, and Sheik was not known for handing out compliments, by the way.
Right.
He says the guy knew what he was doing every minute in that ring. He said he was absolutely on top of everything, and he was one of the best. And then he started drinking and went crazy. He ended it with a negative, but the part I'm stressing is the Sheik himself talked about how great Jerry Graham was. And if you'd like to see Jerry Graham in his prime, on YouTube, there's a video with him and Angelo Savoli wrestling, which I think he shows for a 300-pound guy the way he could move and the way he another expert, and this is firsthand account, was Dusty Rhodes. Mm-hmm. Dusty Rhodes personally told me that the Graham brothers, Jerry and Eddie, were the greatest tag team ever in wrestling. That's Dusty's opinion, not mine. Now, Dr. Jerry Graham, he was trained by Jim Londas. Okay, I don't think there's many guys that could be a better teacher than Jim Londas. Once again, you younger guys, he was one of the all-time greats.
Yeah.
They called him the Golden Greek. He was absolutely fantastic. He trained Jerry. Jerry's also a war hero in World War II. He was the 82nd Airborne with General Slim Jim Gavin, and he was very patriotic. He was in combat. He fought for our country. When he became a professional wrestler after he got out of the Army, he made a name for himself. And I didn't have time to go through all the things that he did, but one of the first things with Vince McMahon Sr. was Dr. Jerry Graham and Professor Roy Shires. They were both educated men, Roy the graduation cap and gowns, and they were a great tag team. And Roy Shires went on his way, and of course went on to become a promoter in San Francisco and very successful.
Right.
When Jerry Graham was then wrestling by himself. Now, the next story I'm going to tell you is I believe to be true, although I wasn't there at the time, but I had enough witnesses of people that I trust. The Fargo brothers were big in New York for Vince McMahon Sr., Don and Jackie. And one night they had a huge gate. I believe it was at a ballpark, but I might be wrong on that, but it was a huge gate. And they decided to do what we Russians call hold Vince up. And that means, for you people who don't know what it is, if there's a huge gate near the main event, you threaten to walk out and leave him standing if he doesn't give you more money than what you're used to getting. It also means you're going to get fired. But so the Fargos held up Vince McMahon, and Vince paid them and then fired them, of course. And Jerry told Vince, and by the way, Jerry was the only wrestler that had Vince McMahon Sr.'s ear. So for this guy that people are calling a maniac, a lunatic, an alcoholic, this and that, one of our all-time great promoters, Vince McMahon Sr., would listen to one wrestler when it came to ideas, angles, programs, and that was Dr. Jerry Graham. And he told Vince, listen, you don't need the Fargo brothers. He says, there's a guy from Tennessee named Eddie Gossett. He says, they call him One-Eyed Eddie Gossett because he had something wrong with one of his eyes. So the guy's a terrific worker, never had an opportunity. Let's bring him up here, make him my brother, make him Eddie Graham, and we'll form a tag team. And they brought him up, and the rest is history. They drew tremendous crowds. Eddie got his eye fixed. They started making money. Jerry said he had something wrong with his eye, but he got it surgically fixed. And they were drawing money like mad for years all over the upper East Coast of Vince McMahon's territory. And they would go out sometimes to other territories, as you know, and Vince would book them out. They always drew money, and they were always fantastic. They were a tremendous team. And Eddie Graham was known as one of the smartest bookers and promoters of all time. Much of what he learned from Dr. Jerry Graham.
Yep.
And I would also say Crazy Luke Graham, other great wrestler, learned Dr. Jerry Graham. And don't forget Superstar Billy Graham, who was trained and learned almost everything he knew from Dr. Jerry Graham. This is a legacy which people seem to be forgetting. Yep. Dr. Jerry Graham made a tremendous impression on professional wrestling in spite of his demons. Who of us is not perfect? He was without sin cast the first stone. But I will admit that Jerry went overboard. I mean, I've seen him at his worst, too. Because I've seen him at his best. I've seen him when he was... But one time I invited him to a party that my father had at his house. He showed up completely sober, was the hit of the party. He was absolutely brilliant, conversational. People loved him. People said, Jerry, this guy is a great man. You know, when he was sober, and I'm going to tell you, there was nobody in his business that could come up with an angle or if you had a situation, how do we get out of this? And Jerry Graham was as good as anybody that ever laced up their boots. And he did have a very sad, tragic ending, but that's been said so much. We all know that. Anybody that pays attention to the podcasts and the TV shows and this and that. Yeah. But Jerry Graham definitely overall had a negative life, but he made a pretty much of a positive influence on wrestling, and I'll stand by that, and I'll debate that with anybody that wants to disagree with me, because he was a genius. He was a wrestling genius.
Yeah, a lot of people forget how big a draw he was. Him, especially him. I mean, selling out Madison Square Garden, wrestling Buddy Rogers, Bruno Sammartino, him and Eddie as the Golden Grahams selling out Madison Garden. I mean, Vince McMahon Jr.'s favorite wrestler. And
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
I mean, he was a huge star, and like you mentioned, the guys that he trained, got started, and helped. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, because like you said, all they do is sensationalize the negative parts, and that's all they want to talk about. And
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. Part of it, I think, is maybe that he was pre-video, right? A lot of his main years, so there's not as much video out there of him, and so
Yeah,
people
well, he
see
was on
late.
television. I
Yeah,
don't know how much of TV they could save, you know.
right. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, yeah, just wasn't a thought
but
then to save that stuff, when they
and
could.
don't forget, you pointed out some good things. Let's add to that. When he was with Eddie, they wrestled Argentina Rock and Miguel Perez,
Yeah.
Mark Lewin and Don Curtis. They had all Dick and the biggest riot in the history of wrestling, Dick the Bruiser
Yep.
and Jerry Graham
Yep.
against Rocca and Edvard Carpentier.
Yep.
I mean, he was definitely a part of wrestling that he helped make wrestling what it was as wrestling progressed along. And back in the days when they had you hold on a hammerlock for a half hour and people would be screaming and yelling, that wouldn't fly today. The wrestling had to evolve into what it was, and Jerry Graham was one of the people that helped move the profession forward into what it's become. And I just wanted to go down on a record of saying that he was not just some bum that was hanging around. I mean, he could have gone what he did. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to add to the thought that all the great tag matches he had against all the greatest wrestlers. Mark Lewin liked him. I was friendly with Mark Lewin at one time, and he said he made a ton of money with Jerry Graham.
Yeah. It is peculiar because I'm not going to throw out names, but there's so many guys who are idolized in professional wrestling who had just as dark a side as Dr. Jerry Graham, and did things just as, if not bad, or if not worse. And I'm not gonna spill some of those stories and things. It's all out there.
We're not here to get anybody mad at. We're not here to get anybody mad at us.
It's all out there, but people overlook a lot of that for a lot of people. But when you hear people talk about Dr. Jerry Graham, it's only those negatives that people
I'll
seem
tell you. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's just they key on those negatives, and that's all they seem to do, which they overlook for a lot of other guys. It's very peculiar.
Anybody that says, "Oh, that Jerry Graham, he was just a drunk." If he was a baseball fan and he says, "Oh, that Babe Ruth was just a drunk and a womanizer. He was nothing."
Yeah.
He may have had a rough personal life, but Babe Ruth obviously, added to baseball and helped baseball. In fact, he brought baseball out of the slump it was in after the Black Sox scandal when they fixed the World Series, allegedly.
Yep.
People stopped coming to baseball games until Babe Ruth saved in the 20s. Well, Dr. Jerry Graham, people came to see him. He was a tremendous card. He's a tremendous wrestler. And as he started to fade, and I was with him at the end of his career when I used to have to wrestle 75% of the matches because he was just a little too old. Now that I'm old, I think I'm older than he was then.
Yeah.
I didn't mind doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't mind driving all the way to the towns because he'd be drinking after the matches and stuff like that. But he, when you needed something, he had it. And I've heard stories at the end in California he'd really gotten even worse if that was possible. But like I said, but the bad side is not. I just want to say he made a tremendous positive influence on this business. I'll stand by it. I'll stand by my reputation of 40 years in the business. And a lot of the old timers used to praise him, even though they knew his Louis Martinez thought he was great.
Mm-hmm.
Louis Martinez thought he was great, as did Mark Lewin. And when you look at the Florida territory that Eddie Graham ran so successfully, and I'm not saying one word against Eddie Graham. I mean, Eddie Graham was a great booker, great promoter, great wrestler.
Yep.
But would that have happened if it weren't for Dr. Jerry Graham?
Yep. Which led to, Eddie Graham taught Dusty Rhodes. So, there's it was passed down.
Yeah. And would there be Superstar Graham, who just passed away, rest his soul?
Yep.
He was a tremendous started tremendous business. He was the WWF champion, and there would have been no Superstar Graham had it not been for Dr. Jerry Graham. So he impacted the business in a very positive way, as well as his dark side. And like you said, everybody's got different shades of gray. We're not all good, we're not all bad, and he maybe had a little bit darker shades in some, but he definitely was a positive influence on it. The business is better off for him having been in it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because I mean, Hulk Hogan has said many, many times, right, that his whole thing was pretty much taken from Superstar Billy Graham, which, if it, where would that have, look at this, the boom and the success with that. So that, I mean, again, another lineage back, Superstar getting his start with, Jerry Graham. So, a lot of things changed the course. You take that away, and where would things have gone?
Yeah. Well, and with me, I didn't go as far as Superstar Graham or Eddie Graham, obviously. I'm not delusional, but I say I had 40-some years in the business. I did. Yeah. And I wrestled all the greats. I seen it. One fan called me the Forrest Gump of wrestling. I was always there when things were happening. He was making a joke, but I thought it was funny. I thought it was kind of true. Yeah. I was there when Vince Jr. took over for his dad. Yeah. I was there when Ted Turner took over Georgia Wrestling. I wrestled for Georgia Wrestling before they became WCW. I feel I'm at very least qualified to give an educated opinion of anything in wrestling. But this was one that started to bother me because I've been seeing it going. They're sending Jerry down into the sewer, and I maybe I can't make any difference, but I feel better having gone on the record with you.
Yeah, I mean, of course you make a difference. I mean, because we have to hear both sides of a story, right, to get the full picture, and that's kind of what we're doing here. Because people only hear the one side, and not only your experience, but like you said earlier, the time you spent with Jerry Graham. A lot of this is not just you being in the business. This is you being with Jerry Graham. So a lot of this.
I'm wondering how many of these people that are knocking, and not to interrupt you, ever even met Jerry Graham.
Probably very few, if any. Yeah.
Well, I lived with the guy.
Yeah.
He lived at my house. And I'll tell you something else. If you want to make, he also used to live at the Sheik's house. The Sheik liked him too. The Sheik had a big house up in Williamston, Michigan, and Jerry Graham would just show up and I'd always have an extra room for him. The Sheik was very good to Jerry Graham as well. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's pretty much, I got it off my chest. Thank you, Dave Dynasty. Nope. I'm not up with all the podcasts anymore, but you were the first one I went on, and I just wanted to get that out there into the ozone for people to know that there was a positive side to Dr. Jerry Graham.
Absolutely.
Not to be redundant, if anybody wants to debate that with me on your show or anywhere else,
sure, yeah,
I'll be more than happy to listen to their opinions. I'm not out to start a fight with anybody. I'm not out to start a feud with anybody. Nope. I'm saying this is my opinion. If I disagree with your opinion, I hope we can refer to Thomas Jefferson, who said, I won't allow anybody's opinion on religion, politics, or philosophy cause me to withdraw from a friendship. So I have friends that may not agree with me. I hope they're still my friends. I'm 76 years old, so I'm not out to start a fight or a feud or anything else. I just want to get things straight as I see it.
Yep.
And I'll be willing to listen to any counter argument as long as it's a friendly debate, not a screaming argument. I won't get involved in something like that. Yep. If somebody wants to discuss Jerry Graham with me on an intellectual and intelligent manner and disagree with me, I'll be more than happy to talk to them about it. But that's pretty much it. Jerry Graham needed to be in the business, and the business is better off for him having been in it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wrestling Fans International Association is back. That's right, the premier fan club association of the 1970s and 1980s has been revived and is back in business. Join today. It's free at thewfia.org. That's thewfia.org. You can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/WFIA 1969.
One of the all-time greats, Dr. Jerry Graham.
Possibly the most hypnotic superstar in history, Graham combined the power of a gladiator with the mind of a genius. Alongside his Swami sidekick, the blonde Adonis outwit many opponents with his superior intellect. 1 ounce of brain power can conquer tons of muscle, Graham would say, as his successful philosophy led him to multiple championships around the world.
All right, and we're back here on Wrestling Nostalgia. Thank you for listening to that. Thank you to Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. for coming on and talking with me about Dr. Jerry Graham and shining some light on the positives of Dr. Graham and his impact on wrestling and what he did. Again, no one's displacing the negatives and the demons and the things that he battled with, but there is a very positive side. There is some good of Dr. Jerry Graham, and it wasn't always like that. And that wasn't just it, that right? That wasn't all him. There's two sides of this. So thank you to Jerry for coming on and talking to us about that. If you want to hear Jerry talk a little more about Dr. Jerry Graham, there is an episode that he and I did of Graham's Gallery from a couple years back. There's a link in the show notes. You can go to that. We talk a little more about Dr. Jerry Graham and tell a few more stories. So you can listen to that if you would like to hear more. Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to us on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. And make sure you like, share, and then rate and review us on that, because that helps us in the algorithm. It helps us come up as a suggested listen when people listen to other podcasts. So help us out by doing that. And you can also follow us on social media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Just look up Wrestle Nostalgia, RASSLE NOSTALGIA. We're available on all those platforms. And you can follow me personally on Twitter at The Dave Dynasty. That's the best place to follow me. If you'd like to support the show, please go and buy one of our shirts at PROWRESTLINGTEES.com/The Dave Dynasty. We have lots of things to choose from there. Show shirts, some wrestler shirts for some of the friends of the show that we've got up there. Lots of cool things. So go check those out. Remember, guys, when you're out there and you're watching things, whatever it is, support what you like. Just don't worry about what you don't. There's no need to go on and rip somebody apart for what they like. It's all opinions. It's all taste. And we all differ. And that's okay, right? We can all like different things. So just support what you like. Spread a little love. Spread a little joy. And it's all good. That is it for this episode. Thank you again to Jerry for coming on this episode about Dr. Jerry Graham and his legacy in professional wrestling. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Wrestling Nostalgia. So we hope you'll tune in then. And until then, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.